James, thanks for having me back. It's good seeing you again. It's been a while. We're at the Secret Space Program Conference in Grafton, Illinois, from the guys from Journey to Truth put on, and it's going smashingly well. It's like a well-oiled machine. This conference is great. The the big thing from this one, I think, is because it's all secret space program. It's not a bunch of um, separate subjects. So it's reflecting that the crowd is all up to speed. It's a really high energy event. It's been good, and why I'm looking disheveled a little bit because it's like easy to be tired. So thanks for having me back. The last one we did was at 5D events, and we covered, was it one episode or two? I remember we left off. We did two, and we left off I think around the moon. We wanted to go, and you wanted to ask me about Ceres Colony, what life was like in the secret space program for Ceres Colony Corp. And so on Mars, I was a support soldier. So they were trying to get combat support for the real soldiers with minimally trained support troops. So they were trying to get numbers quickly, guys that they could train in a very short time, that were minimally equipped, that were cheap, and just filled the battlefield. And that got canceled. That program got canceled. And we sat in a lame duck, like 6 weeks. It was a long time where we literally did nothing. We just sat in our room. We had nothing to do. And while they were figuring out what they were going to do with us. And then one day they loaded us up and transported us to a bigger city that was underground. And it was very modern. I think we might have covered some of this, but then I was retrained, and they gave me aptitude tests, and I was retrained, and then I landed on ship maintenance, and I was trained in quickly with that, and then shipped off to Ceres Colony. And the first day there, I might have covered this too, was they actually sent me on the wrong train, and I went into the mines and worked it one day with the mining crews that are mining out pockets of the material on Ceres so that they can. They were looking specifically for water, pockets of water, and but anyhow, I worked one day at it, and I thought I thought it was funny because I got trained for ship maintenance, and then all of a sudden I was running a shovel. But when they figured out the mishap, the next day I went to the hangar base and got actually assigned to my ship. I believe it was the Blitz bus, something like that, Lightning Horse, something. Which was an old submarine. It was an old, like a World War II submarine, like what you see in the movies. Very cramped on the inside, and the doors had high thresholds. It had the doors you could close and seal off. And that was what I did for the next 8 years. And just rode from there back and forth because there was no money. I was free to go from where I lived, but I didn't have money to buy a train ticket, so it was a long walk to town, so I didn't do it. And it was like being in a prison, basically prison labor. But we would go on the ship. You couldn't tell it was moving, and I didn't know if we were in still at the hangar working all day on it, or if it was moving out in space. You couldn't tell. They closed the door. There was no window for us, and it was sealed off. We were on the lower decks, like deck and a half, and there was a computer screen that told us what to do. It said your number that you had. You go to the crib and grab this, and this, and then go to this junction and open that up and return. And you'd come back, and it would know. You didn't have to press a button or anything. It would know you were there. And it would say, now go back and open this, and this. And it just was like mindless. It had the effect of, if you drive somewhere, if somebody gives you directions and you drive somewhere and then you find it just from the written directions because you have to search. And so then you automatically know how to drive there ever after again. You retain the knowledge. But if the navigator map tells you turn left here, you don't pay attention and you can't find your way back the next time without the navigation. It was the same experience with getting step-by-step instructions to do the maintenance. There were things that I learned how to do because I did it repeatedly, but basically it was mindless, Years past that ship, we did a few missions. I volunteered for high-risk missions to be included in missions that may be fatal, with the promise of possibly getting promoted and getting a different position that wasn't as horrible as what I was in. just lonely. And the other two guys that I worked with we didn't get along. It was just a bad chemistry. And it wasn't a good experience for those years. I was depressed. I sunk into a depression from it, you know. Pretty sure the guys I worked with were Americans, so there was a mix of, like, they kept the English speaking people together, even though we had translator devices. We did have the ability on the Blitz bus. All the guys that I worked with spoke English, so they were Americans or English speaking Europeans. And it seemed like most of the guys in the barracks spoke English too. There wasn't a translator area. By the cafeteria, there was it worked like a Bluetooth. So I think it was an implant, like a Neuralink that we all got, you know, but I wouldn't have known. They did so many surgeries on me. It was like, I wouldn't have known, but it worked like a Bluetooth, like you get in range of about a Bluetooth distance to certain areas, and the translator would work. So you could meet people that spoke a different language and understand them. But for those years on the Blitz bus, basically I didn't worry about translation at all. I think I was around English speaking people. Did they tell me that the Earth was destroyed and play that narrative? So at that point, no, they just didn't speak. It was like, I wasn't briefed on anything. I got up in the morning, got on a train, and went to the ship, went in my own entrance, and did my job. And there was rumor. You heard from guys in the mines who heard from other guys that did this or that. You know, there were rumors. There was a grapevine of things, but I may have heard like that, like rumblings of it, but I didn't believe it, and because I just came from there. And, but no, they didn't officially tell me that until later on when I was on a different ship. The memories of my childhood were gone at that point. So when I woke up in Inyokern in the beginning, I didn't have any memories of where I came from, but I was stationed in Inyokern, Seattle, and Peru in the early years. The first 6 to 8 years of my 20 years, I was on Earth. So I had those memories when I was on Ceres Colony. Like, I still remembered the Earth. They didn't begin with that until later, and I think because of that might be why I got posted to engineering, why I was a fit there, because I got posted on my next ship in cargo engineering, and that was above the level of secrecy about the Earth being destroyed. So because we were aware we were going to, the guys in cargo could look out the window, and we were aware that we were going to Earth to pick up cargo. So we were also aware that was classified, that they were telling people that the Earth was destroyed. Really, the times that were enjoyable for me were when I got promoted to the Max von Laue to be cargo engineer, and I don't really remember a FedEx ship or any, logos. There were logos on things, but I just didn't really pay attention to them. So I don't remember that. We took cargo all over the place on Earth. So the main one for military surplus and a lot of places was Diego Garcia. We would go there in the middle of the night and drop off and mostly pick up cargo. Usually we went there and we would drop a small box and we would pick up tons of cargo that were waiting there on the tarmac. There were places in the Catarina Mountains in South America. We went to Antarctica. There were two separate places in Antarctica we went, and we would take cargo there, but it wasn't the main mission when we went there. It was like a checkup, or the officers were summoned there to go through a testing or a checkup, and while we were there, we would just take cargo. We went to the Kuiper belt. They had warehouse facilities in hollowed out, basically big chunks of ice that are out in the Kuiper belt. A slurry, they would hollow it out and make a warehouse and pressurize it, and we would drop cargo there, and that's where they stored. They had like a storage facility for a lot of things, and we would go there. We would take. There were times when we would pick up a large amount of something, and we would go to the Kuiper Belt facility and drop off 80% of the load, and then take the 20% back to Ceres Colony. And we did that quite often, so that's why we went there a lot. And it was a long drive. They didn't jump back from the Kuiper Belt. Sometimes if they needed to, they did, but other than that, they would fly back, and it was like a longer 4 or 5 hours of flight that they would do. I don't know. that was the scheduling. I didn't really understand how that worked. Contraband that we cargo. So it was my job to make sure that people didn't sneak things through the cargo. It was my job, but they were fully aware of what they did. I caught once a case broke open and I saw inside of it there were bags of coffee, and I reported it, and so the whole mission had to be delayed. It was a big thing. They were actually purposely sneaking coffee to a world. We might have talked about this, sneaking coffee to a world where it was a narcotic for the people. Okay, so coffee and chocolate, you're asking about why is it on Earth? So they can grow it elsewhere, but it has different effects. It has different potencies and different effects, different chemical properties. So the plants actually was pharmaceuticals was a big business that they found that they could trade with more advanced civilizations, because the plants that a lot of pharmaceuticals are made out of grow to have different potencies on Earth or on different planets that they had access to. So plant life, you don't take a plant off Earth and go plant it on some other Earth-like planet and get the same plant after a generation or two. It turns into, it adapts to that environment and has different chemical properties. So for that reason, pharmaceuticals were a big business for them. Like at one point towards the end, like in my last months there, they converted the gymnasium into a big, they had big centrifuges mixing up. They were trying to make a pharmaceutical because they had a deal to trade. So they shut the gymnasium down and actually set it up as a pharmaceutical factory temporarily, because it was so profitable in the deal that they had made. I was in charge of 2 cargo bays on the port side of the ship. So they were two cargo bays about, I don't know, maybe 150 feet long by 75 feet wide. They were long, and they had walls that could pop up. We could rearrange the walls to section them up with it. That was those were mine that I was the engineer in charge of, and there were 5 to 7 guys that would come and work down there. I'd give them the reports. The main cargo bay in the back actually had Ceres Colony personnel, like an officer running that. He was the main engineer, and he ran the C cargo bay, the rear one, and it was much larger. He was the one that was in charge of bootlegging media from Diego Garcia. So we were all aware of it, and even they didn't want to tell the captain, like the command was not aware of it. But he was sneaking off books and VHS tapes and CDs, everything he could get his hands on, mostly books. They had a television with a VHS player that they brought, and the guys were watching. They would set him up in that cargo bay, and while we had those long flights, the guys down there would watch VHS movies from Earth. So they were bootlegging it. He was doing it for profit. So under the nose of the ship's command, and everybody was kind of aware of it, and we always wanted to ask those guys what was the movie? Tell me about the movie. Did you see any? Was it good? And they'd always give us their little review of what movie. One movie that I remember them. So this is weird, maybe weird, but they told me about Dreamcatcher, the Stephen King movie. The scene in it where the guy's like on the toilet and there's a monster coming out of the toilet. They explained that a buddy of mine from the Sea Cargo came up, and he's like, dude, it was so scary. He was like, it would mess you up, because I already talked about being scared of the toilet. Like rats can come up through the toilet. We already talked about that anyway. And he mentioned the movie, and he said that would terrify you. And that was something that always kind of stuck with me. And when back when the movie came out, and I watched it, and I need to look. I mean, it's worth double checking the timeline to make sure when that movie came out. So it would have had to been before 2000. I mean, I could Google it. But when it did come out and I saw that scene, it kind of screwed me up. It was not even a bleed through of a memory. It was a memory that broke through. Then I went, wait a minute, how did I see this? How do I know about this before? How did I know about this? It was one of those situations. So. But there was a thriving bootleg. Everybody says that our media doesn't get up there. There are signals, but we had access to music and stories from Earth. The books were big, but there was a thriving bootleg business, and we were all jealous that we weren't in on it, like the guys in the back were. They would brag about when movies were awesome. When they would see a movie that was good, they would brag about it, but I didn't see it. The Stephen King one was relevant to a conversation I had already, like it worked out, But they would tell us about movies. I think that they did get the Star Wars movies and talked about that too. During my time on Ceres Colony, we did not really discuss adrenochrome. So that was really something that wasn't really talked about among us. Human trafficking was real, and we several times took people that were being trafficked as cargo. And there were times when they would tell us that we had people on board, that they were going to be trafficked, and there were times when they kept it secret. There was a bay underneath the center bay that was short, because the floor in the main cargo bay could go up or down 3 to 5 feet, or so they could, if they had tall items, they could lower the floor into that second bay. So when they kept the floor raised, that second bay, we had sample packages down there, and there was times when they filled it with people, and they didn't tell us, but we still knew. All the guys were like, "There's people down there," and I was like, "Go! I don't believe you. Go check." I sent a guy, "Go down there and just act like you're sweeping up and go check." And sure enough, there were 70 or 80 people down there, and later on, the reason we found out is because they were stealing those people from other people that were trafficking people. So they were definitely up to no good. It was a by any means necessary mission to acquire technology was the mandate for the ship, and that was, from what I remember, exactly right. They would lie, cheat, and steal. We were the Ceres Colony Corporation, so other fleets would hire us to do missions where they had like a neutral status. So we would take cargo for other fleets where they weren't allowed to go, like as a contractor. But basically, we were solely our ship, and I want to say that there was 8 to 12 other ships just like mine. There may probably more, but that I was aware of. We were the Ceres Colony Corporation on a trading mandate. So we didn't actually, other than moving cargo inside the solar system to the Kuiper belt and from Earth, we really didn't stick around this star system much. We would go far away and try to negotiate new deals with other species for new technologies. That was our primary mission. The Kuiper belt had a warehouse place, but the Ceres Colony they had found ruins from another species that built it a very long time ago, and then they began converting it to human dwellings, and then mining and adding out. They began building human buildings inside giant caverns. But the caverns, and there was actually like an airlock system for the hangar bay, that they found that there, abandoned. So, obviously the ETs knew about it, and when they made their original deal to be an ally of the Draco, it was someplace that was gifted to them. And they moved in and started building. And the architecture there was old by the time I was there in, 90, late 80s to all the way to 2000. There were a lot of things that were rusty. There were, they had pressurized ceilings in some areas, and they were just like the corrugated metal. And you could see where things had fallen and dented them from the top. Like it was old. There was rust, and it showed age. And then a lot of the old architecture looked like what you'd see in cities from old buildings that were built in the 30s. Like you go to a skyscraper that was built in the 30s and 40s. It's got the marble steps and the more ornate. A lot of the construction there was like that. They did have buildings. Built vertically. So there were areas that they found that they converted that actually went from miles vertical down caverns that they were in, and they were curved. And they had where they went, and they found rooms that had no ledge that were on a vertical surface. And I remember that they built catwalks that could access, and they built a lift, like an industrial elevator that was 20 feet by 20 feet big, and it was very industrial. It had a cage around it, and you would ride it for a long time. But I remember standing on the ledge and looking down, and you could see kind of the lights of the other levels under us. And I was aware that if you jumped off, you would go into the microgravity. You would leave the artificial gravity and go into the microgravity, and so you wouldn't get hurt. You could actually get stuck out there. If you jumped off, you would slowly fall. You would drift down to the bottom of the cavern, which was miles down. And so we always thought, but I always wanted to get the courage up to jump out there and do that. But I would have gotten in big trouble. So it was something like I remember sitting on the ledge. People that spend a lot of time on the edge of a building or from a high place, you kind of sit there and look at it, and it's like a moth to a flame thing. This one, I was aware that there was microgravity just over the ledge, and I always wanted to just jump into it, but we never did. Most of the buildings there were 4 or 5 stories tall. When they had replica cities, when you walked down a street, there were 4 or 5 stories, and then they had, and they looked like regular buildings like you'd see in a city. We were aware that there were entire deals where we gave several shiploads of goods for a math formula. The technology is the currency. And so for them to come to Earth and trade, there were things that they trade. They had a system set up where they could get goods from Earth. There was a whole shadow system, like a black system, that get it for accounting. But basically they weren't paying for much that they got from the Earth. But it was all about technology. So that is the real currency. They had several currencies. I believe they had a cryptocurrency there. They had several forms of currency at the trade window that you could access and set up an account. There were ETs that went there that they came from social systems that didn't have money. And so they had a limitless spending. And what they found is that those species are not wasteful. So it's not like they gave them an account that was limitless because they only would purchase things that they needed. They weren't wasteful with it. So it was their culture they came from. Everybody else had to get a banking system, join the bank at the trade window. And they had like facial recognition, and they had jewelry bracelets that you could do your banking with. But basically it was all about technology. They traded, when they got a new technology, they could trade it with other colonies in the solar system, other corporations for tech. So there was a real race between the colonies for technology. There was a colony on Vesta. I want to say that Vesta. The other large body in the asteroid belt had a mining colony on it, and they were a completely different corporation than the Ceres Colony Corp. So they did trade personnel. There were guys that transferred from there, but the asteroid belt was under its own corporation that we didn't have access to. Like the Ceres Colony was independent. There were ruins on Mars when we did hiking missions on Mars. There were old stone structures that were supposedly millions of years old. They said that the scientists had already been there and studied. Don't touch it. There were artifacts that they found. So that was the other thing that was through the grapevine, was that the miners on Ceres, when they emptied out of pockets of water, that they were finding artifacts from ancient structures that were built in water. There were times when we were just a cargo service for more advanced speed races that had, we would take cargo that was like we couldn't use it. It didn't belong to us. We were dropping it off. And there were times when people from the command crew would come down and look at it. They'd open the box. I just want to look at it. And there were missiles that that they did that for. And there were other things that I don't know what they did, but they would want to come down and have a look because they kind of looked at it. They coveted it. But there was a missile that was like a nuclear missile that they said was unstoppable. Like once they fired it, nothing, and it was small. It was like 4 feet long, 3-4 feet long. It was very tiny, but they said once it was fired, there was no stopping it. That it could pass through solid objects to get to its target and then detonate. People ask me actually quite a bit if people had pets, and I was unaware of that. I don't think that they did. I don't think that there were any pets there. Sometimes there were plants on the side of the road, and in certain areas they would have, plants. No rain. There was a river network. Like they had canals where they moved water in artificial gravity. They collect it, and there were times when you'd walk over a bridge and it was water flowing under it. And I think that was simply like the water system, how it worked. That they had. It wasn't for looks by any means. It was very industrial looking, with the places where you would walk over water. But But the pets and the animals, I don't know. I was also aware that they did have areas where they grew their own food. They grew food, but I never came in. I never went there. I never set eyes on it. So they were growing their own food in areas, but that wasn't something that affected the oxygen or even the food supply. Was all taken care of by artificial means. It was more of a premium deal, like real food was at a premium. Was a big business. It turns out that people are a lot cheaper than robots in the long haul. So they didn't, and I don't know if they were afraid of AI or something, but they had slave labor from day one, and they really perfected it. And I think that people turn out to be cheaper with the system that they had in place. So I didn't see robots anywhere. They always had people to come and clean up. They had a cell phone that was clear, that was see-through, and I know because when I was really nervous getting on the trains. So because I wore a slave collar and my suit identified me, I was open to being ordered around in public. So somebody could see me and say, "Hey, excuse me, get over here and clean this up," or whatever. And when we boarded the trains, that was the time that was most likely for me to get picked on, if you will. So when I got on the train, I was a little bit nervous that somebody was going to say, "Hey, come here and hold this," or do something stupid. And when the train got going, I waited for the minute that everybody would pull out their phones. And literally everybody did. They pulled out and they were clear. The reason they were clear, that somebody explained to me, was that it's bad for your eyes if you stare at your phone, but if it's clear, your eye kind of can see through it. There's a depth thing, and it's easy. You don't damage your eyesight. So they were all clear, and everybody whipped out their phone. And I remember being on the train and hearing conversations. There was a lady that said that they all said that the government watched them through their phones, and that you could actually get in trouble for things. So they had the same kind of system that we did back, in the 90s. They had cell phones they were all aware they were watching them. They were all addicted to their apps they had in it. And everybody was on their phone. And I was very upset that I didn't have one. I was the same way that kids in school, everybody has a phone, but Dad, can I have a phone? I was very resentful that I did not have access to the entertainment. People would show each other things, and I would sit in the conversations of how entertained they were. And I was very upset that I didn't have one. There were a few times when I needed a device, but for the most part, I didn't have my own technology. Was there ever a slave revolt? No. They were very heavy-handed, and there was absolutely no hope of that. We thought about it, like it was something you would fantasize about, like being set free. I remember thinking about it quite a bit, but they were very proficient, and we had all been programmed. There was also a level of psychological programming that was done, so it wasn't something that would ever really manifest. I only heard stories from the girls that they said they went to places that were very lavish, that they had gravity art or clothes or houses that they would perturb the gravity for artwork. So imagine like a round room that you could walk up around, and that they used gravity artwork, because I remember Crumbs had a gravity, an anti-gravity, like a low-grav art piece installed in the foyer. And it would have low-grav fireballs and water. And I remember when that came in, that I would talk to the girls about how much I loved it. And they said, "That's nothing. You should see what they have. Their homes are amazing." That they had a lot of, spaces in the house where they had gravity, and then spaces where they had gravity turned off, and they would have things hanging, artwork in the middle of the room floating there. And then the house constructed around gravity in different areas, that they had lavish homes. But I never set foot in any of them. I never went to because I was a slave, and because I tended to get picked on by people, I would be put to task by people when I came in contact. So if I went to the ritzy area, I would be a slave there, and somebody had every right to abuse me, or take me and say, "Hey, clean this up while you're here." And so I avoided places like that. I don't really know that the internet was like there. Like you said, it was Mars, and I wasn't really aware of that because I never had access to it, and we referred to it as network. The other thing is, so I did know this, that on the ship, when the progress officer came around with his device to put us, he said that the Wi-Fi was actually dangerous. That the same way that our Wi-Fi is, they warn you about it. He said that when the device makes a straight beam to the Wi-Fi, to the network, and standing in that beam is actually bad for you. And he was aware of that. It was the same type of systems like what we have. So Adolf Hitler was classified. So only like the top 3 people on Ceres Colony had access to the data. He was classified. Even the colonels and the high ranking ship captains, they had no idea. They was classified above them. Everybody agreed that he lived, that he did not die in World War II, that he lived and went to Argentina. And there was rumor that he was, is he alive still or is he dead? Like that was the thing. It was classified to even them. They didn't know what happened to Hitler. But everybody agreed that he didn't die in the war in that bunker. So are there new Schwabenlanders alive today? I would have to speculate and say yes. So do I know for sure? Because somebody told me? No. But they all had access to life extending tech. They were all drinking like a milkshake every morning that was like they already had technology. They were working on living longer. And they were told me that, if we ever see you, like I'm going to grow old and they're not, kind of thing. So they had life extension technology when I was there. And I would expect the same guys that I worked with back in the 90s to still be up there. So super soldiers, nowadays I hate the term, because it's been pirated by people that everything's a super soldier to everything, so it's a blanket. But we did take elite troops on the ship. We loaded them from the gymnasium to the ship and then took them, as cargo to a destination. But they were not soldiers. They were in like a shiny black armor with helmets on, and their pants, their armor pants would lock so that they could sit down, and the pants would lock so that they could just sit there and wait. And they would sit still for 20 hours, 30 hours. They would just sit there and wait. And it was a dog whistle. He blew a dog whistle and then they all stood up. Like I was there, myself and 2 other engineers were there and walked to the gymnasium. He said, watch this. And we blew the dog whistle and they all stood up at attention after being idle for like 16 hours. So they were a half human. I didn't see their face. They were really, and I'm speculating, but they were really a lot like what Jason Rice described as the dog soldiers. They were that height. They were that kind of what he described, like the werewolf soldiers. But they had an armor. They had a huge, like a helmet on it. Like it didn't look like a human helmet. It was more like a ball around, a helmet, and it would swivel. And they were in shiny black, and I believe it could turn to dull black, like they could turn it on and off. And they didn't. There was no interaction. They moved like machines. There was those. The Mars Colony, the time that I was on Mars Colony and did missions, I did standouts. It was impressive to see those guys in the armor. I don't know. I don't want to remark too much about it. So like the new Halo show where they show the guys in the armor, it was the same experience. There was a lot of respect for when the guys had their armor on, it was like seeing somebody in a Lamborghini. They got a lot of respect. The armor was impressive to see. So in the new Halo show, it's like, that's one of the scenes, like I see those scenes and it's the same kind of, you know what I mean? It's like seeing somebody in a once in a lifetime Lamborghini thing. So if they actually called them super soldiers, I don't know. They had a designation, so they were a number on a crew manifest on a cargo manifest for me. They did have a name. I actually like the MXK troop something. They had like a number like that. I'm terrible with the names, but no, they didn't call them super soldiers that I remember. So when I lived back in the barracks on Ceres Colony, we had like a a very rudimentary bathroom that was disgusting. And we had the trough that you pee in, not the individual urinal, but one big long trough that everybody peed in. And we had toilets with water. So Mars Colony had water and then had a bidet, but we had toilet paper on Ceres Colony. It's fun facts of space. I didn't use those toilets though because I was worked on a ship, so I would wait and go at lunch or during the day and use the ship bathroom, which was exactly as small and cramped as an airplane, even smaller as an airplane bathroom. So if you think about going in there, you know how it's like you can barely stand and turn around. It was very small, and it was right next to a place that had a little galley, like an airplane galley. And it had we had a replicator that looked like a microwave, and there was a little refrigerator there, and a countertop and a sink. And I would use the bathroom and wash my hands, and while my food was replicating. And that was kind of my routine. And it was nice. That was for us. I had it made compared to the guys that had to use the public stuff. But everybody went up to C deck to use that bathroom up there. I'm trying to think of anywhere else. The Crumbs, the club in the red light district, had a bathroom just like you would find in a bar, like in a Ruby Tuesdays, and it was the same kind of bathroom. And the Mars Colony didn't really do toilet paper. They had the bidet thing. They had some there, but available. But Ceres Colony had toilet paper. We were importing toilet paper from Earth. We were actually not necessarily our ship, but they did have it taken care of. They were importing toilet paper, and it was that. We didn't have. I remember missing the Mars bathroom. The Mars bathroom was way more sophisticated and a lot more comfortable. Sonic showers, and so yes, and I'll cover that in my second book. I'm working on a second book, but there was a shower that didn't have water, and you would go. It was a light that sterilized you, and it had a sonic, it felt like a massager, like almost a hum that would go over you, and you scrubbed, and it would get you clean. But that's a whole different story. That's going to be an entirely different subject matter that I'm going to wait for the second book to come out before I really get into detail about it, because that's. I like people to believe one thing at a time, to digest one thing that I'm saying at a time before. I don't want to give too much at once and make it just unpalatable. But it was only for certain circumstances, and it actually worked better on other species than humans. The sonic shower wasn't great on humans. Replicator worked. You would put the empty bowl in it. They had bowls next to it with lids with holes in them. And you would put the lid on the bowl and put it in the center of the replicator, like a microwave without a turntable in there. And you would select it. Had the one that I used most of the time had old buttons from it looked like the old Zenith remote control. The buttons were antiquated. It was old. And I think there were only 8 choices. And they were mostly, they were all like a slimy food. It wasn't a high quality, it was like gas station quality food. And that's not being fair to gas stations. The pot roast was the favorite, but you would get sick of it after. It's like you couldn't eat the pot roast every day. You'd get sick of it, so we would save it. And then let's do pot roast today. On a bad day, we would have pot roast to help try to cheer us up. But there was just some mash. And the food that out of the replicator had all your nutrients. So you didn't, I was in better shape then. It had everything you needed. It was like an MRE. And so it would just be mashed potatoes and gravy, but it had protein and everything in there as if you were eating, like a more rounded meal. But it was always too slimy. And it was piping hot. When it came out, it was boiling hot. You had to wait for it to cool down. Eating it was a deal. And actually getting accustomed to eating that food quickly that was very hot was a trick that I used to get ahead of the productivity score of my counterpart, because he always waited for his food to cool, and he had a ritual. So slamming my food quick really gave me the edge on the productivity report and got me in line for promotion, for perks. Well, it's a habit I brought back with me. The next day, I've eaten my food quickly ever since. It's something that, it's one of those things that stayed with me. My room was a 5x10 square. It looked like a prison cell with a cot and a little drawer mounted on the wall, a little desk area mounted on the wall with one drawer in it that was empty. And it was it was cinder blocks, and there was no door. It was open. I could see across the hall. I didn't have any. It was very Spartan. Sometimes we got better clothes hanging, depending. It was mission specific. So when we were going on certain missions, they would give us better looking clothes. If we were going to Antarctica, for instance, the clothes would be brand new, and but it was hanging on a hook. So everything for me to wear was waiting at my hook with my number on it when I got out of the shower, and then so I would take off my pajamas and hang them on the hook and put my clothes on, and leave. So, but when we got back and we had time off, if a mission got scrubbed or something and I was laying around, I would get drafted. They said, "You guys are doing nothing, come on." And I was on work and I had to do laundry. And so we had giant washing machines and we did laundry. And it sucked. And it was on a mass scale. I mean, we're talking about thousands of articles of clothing that we did. So we were shoveling it in the bigger machines. And then you'd have to get it out and separate them and fold them. But there was a lot of guys that it was lame. It was really lame. So getting breakfast, there was a cafeteria, like a buffet thing, and you weren't allowed to really pig out at it. You got your portion that somebody doled out, and that was it. So it was the amount of food, and you couldn't not eat. So if you skipped a meal, you would get penalized for that too. You had to eat your meal when it was. If you skipped a meal to make up time or because you didn't feel like it, which there were many times I didn't want to eat, and they would report you, and you'd have to go see the doctor, and he'd make you run on the treadmill and poke you full of needles, and he made it unpleasant. But they would do that. They're like, okay, if you miss your meal, you're gonna have to come back. So that motivated you to do what you were told. But the meals were small, and actually, I remember being quite content. Hunger really wasn't. I wasn't hungry a lot, so. The book's doing good. It's funny. So we're at the Secret Space Conference, and it's it feels like everybody here has read the book or is in the middle of reading it, and I'm blown away. It's mind blowing to me. The book is really received well. It's getting really good reviews, and I'm glad it's over. To be honest, the book was hard to write. It was 6 years, and I am working on a second book, and I wish I could say that's going well, but it might take me another 6 years. I don't know. Hopefully quicker. But I'm writing on a second book. There's a notebook that I'm making for timeline work that'll be published soon. And then I'm already planning on a third book. This is going to be talking about this, time in life, what's happened since I remembered. So I've got a couple more books planned in me, and it's nice. It's just been a big source of closure for me to have the book done, and it was a real relief. It was something that I stressed about for a long time. It was difficult. The name of the book is Ceres Colony Cavalier, and you can link to it from my website, TonyRodrigues.com, or search it on Amazon in the book section. Go to Amazon Books and put in Ceres Colony Cavalier. It was at number 1 in its category for 6 weeks. It really took off there, so there were people waiting for it. But now it's kind of mellowed out, and it's still, it's selling pretty good. Yeah, that's it.
Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.